So quick story before we dive into the poetics of translation and why normal people like interpreters and court interpreters should do poetic translation. That's actually sort of a contradictory point, or not contradictory, but curious. Actually, let's skip the story because it has nothing to do with translation. It has to do with swimming, and who cares about swimming? But anyway, and leave comments. Like, I'm always curious about what you like, dislike, and so forth, and what new videos I should record and so on. So anything different, anything that sort of knocks you out of your normal routine, right of the mill, or even paradigm is a good thing. You know, like some of the best professionals are born by professionals who dive in, I don't want to say intrude, but who dive into the profession from something else. You know what I mean? Like Mikhail Botvinnik, not to get going on the chess bandwagon again, but if you haven't seen my video about translation and chess, over here. But Mikhail Botvinnik, the world champion, Soviet Union world champion, was a mathematician. And Lewis Carroll was a mathematician. And it's not all about mathematicians, but many professionals dive in from other fields. So what I'm saying is, even if you're a court interpreter, taking a detour and doing something strange, weird, and unconventional like poetic translations will actually give you maybe a new viewpoint. I actually remember this very competent UN interpreter. His name was Chan. He spoke to the ATA, and he was asked, like, how do you rest from your very intense and stressful job of UN interpreting? And he thought about it and he said, by translation. And he did translation for fun. It wasn't a paid job for him, but he would like translate literary beautiful thing. And it's actually very smart because it is a way to rest. Rest is not always lying. Please don't say laying on the sofa. Whatever else you do in life, whatever other sins and pecadillos that you commit, I think in English it's pecadillos, little sins that you commit, please don't say laying and sort out the words lying and laying. I just hate hearing this because I'm a language nerd. But anyway, lying on a sofa is not the only way to rest. One of the definitions of rest is do a different activity. Like if I wanted to rest from these clips, I would go swim or I would study chess, you know, and so forth. So that's one of the reasons. Because it can get you thinking about things that you normally don't think with, like rhyme and rhythm and imagery. And, you know, good imagery is always something useful, even in interpreting, because we definitely work with images, you know? So in any case, it's a different way to approach the profession. And that's why, but now the question is how? If you're gonna do it right? And let's analyze really briefly. I don't want to make it a super detailed explanation of poetic translations. If you haven't read my book, shame on you. No, I'm just kidding. But you should read my book, Translation Essays, and there's one article called The Dance of Hermes and Erato. And Erato was the muse of romantic poetry, and Hermes, besides being a mischievous god, he was also the patron god of translators. So that's why I named the article what I named it. But anyway, and in that article, I go in very deeply and there are very into the topic, and there are many, a plethora of good articles on translation and interpreting in general in that book. But back from advertising to content, basically, like, how do you do it? Well, there are several components in poetry. Obviously, what differentiates poetry is rhythm and rhyme. Unless we're talking about free verse. I'm not an aficionado of free verse, so I'm talking about structured poetry right now. So the components to keep are the structure, rhyme, and rhythm. And in my mental book, a poetic translation doesn't even count as a poetic translation if the rhyme or the rhythm is off, with rare exceptions that I have myself also broken once in a blue moon. That's number one. The meaning, as in any translation, is important, but in poetry, what is so cool, especially about legal translators, interpreters, is you're allowed to deviate from the meaning probably the most that you are in any translation context, right? Because think about it, in medical and business and contracts, you're not really allowed to deviate in meaning. But in poetry, to conserve the imagery, to conserve the beauty, you can very easily deviate from literal meaning. Like, for example, let's say that the poet says, the dance of the moon and the sun. And let's say that it just somehow doesn't work in your language, which normally though it would, but you can say something beautiful like the dance of two stars or the dance of winter and summer if it fits the context and the imagery. You know, and where else can you translate moon and sun as summer and winter? By the way, I have a riddle here for Russian and English linguists, but I'll be really quick about it. Which two pairs of words can you translate between Russian and English as man and woman and still be correct? And I do not mean just grammatical gender, I mean actual gender. And it will be correct. This usually befuddles and puzzles most linguists. So now back to the poetic clip. You have to keep the structure, which is rhyme and rhythm. And in order to do that, you have to hear it or understand it. You have to some degree, keep the meaning. You obviously need to keep the emotional tone or the intent of the author, the poet. So if it's a sad poem, you can't just make it happy. If it's a happy poem, you can't just make it sad. And in general, you should just strive for, like, honestly being the poet, being them, conveying everything they wanted to convey. And if people read the poem, they should have an idea that it was written in that language. It should be that good. You might even become a poet in your own right. And one helpful tip is to actually read poetry in the target language if you're going to translate it, especially similar poetry. Like let's say I were translating Pushkin, which he happens to be the father of modern Russian language and the paragon of and hero of Russian poetry, and he's a 19th century romantic poet. So I would probably read maybe somebody like Byron or Shelley or somebody of the same time period to get into the mood. Or I might just jump into it, right? And you honestly really have to be them. And you have to believe that you're as good as them. Like most people that I know would not even dare to translate Pushkin because it's like, oh my God, who am I to translate Pushkin? It seems like a big responsibility. Well, go on and dare, but don't butcher it. If you're going to translate Pushkin, please keep his rhyme scheme, please keep his rhythm, please, understand the words that you're translating. I'll give you a funny example and then I think we should end off. But there was this really smart guy, actually, polyglot, I met at the ATA conference. And he said to me, I've translated, I forget which poet, Gumilov. And he said, I translated Gumilov and I saw some other translations and they kept the rhythm and rhyme scheme, but they were just not very good in English. And my translation is very good in English. Of course, it doesn't keep the rhyme and the rhythm. And which do you think is more important, Vladimir? And I looked at him and I said, why can't you just do both? You need to do both. It's like an example that I actually had a conflict with a translator I had to fire, and she was translating from Russian, and her English content was good. She was a native speaker, but there were a lot of blunders as far as meaning. And I was pointing them out to her. This is actually kind of my test to see if I can work with somebody. I politely point out the mistakes and see if people can actually take the good criticism, and you should be able to take it yourself, if you're on a project. But anyway, and this lady said to me at one point, well, do you want a correct translation or do you want an idiomatic translation? I said both. It's not an exclusive proposition. It's not a contradictory proposition. You want it to be both. So give it a try. If you're a translator, a legal translator, an illegal translator, hopefully not, or if you're an interpreter, try poetic or creative translations. And who knows, you might be really good at it. Let me know what other topics I should describe on the channel. Read my book if you haven't, and have a good night. I'll talk to you soon.